Picture this. The world's most powerful technology, smartphones, electric vehicles, fighter jets, AI supercomputers, all grinding to a halt. Not because of a pandemic, not because of war, but because one country controls the invisible materials that make modern life possible. On December 1st, China just proved they're willing to use that power. And what happened next should terrify every government and every CEO in the Western world. December 1st wasn't just another day in global trade. It was the moment Beijing drew a line in the sand that nobody saw coming. China's Ministry of Commerce issued a directive that might sound technical on the surface, but make no mistake, this was an economic missile aimed straight at the heart of the chip industry. The announcement was deceptively simple. Any lithography machinery containing even 0.1% Chinese rare earth elements would now need Beijing's explicit approval before leaving the country. Doesn't matter where the equipment was built, doesn't matter where it's headed. If it contains Chinese materials, China gets the final say. Now, to the average person, that might sound like regulatory fine print. But to semiconductor executives across Europe, America, and Asia, this was a five-alarm fire. Because lithography equipment isn't just important to chip making, it's everything. These are the machines that etch microscopic circuits onto silicon wafers, the foundation of every processor, every memory chip, every piece of technology you're using right now. And there's one company that makes the most advanced versions of these machines in the entire world. ASML, based in the Netherlands. But here's the twist Beijing knew all along. ASML can't build those machines without China. To understand why China escalated this dramatically, we need to rewind 3 months, to September 30th, 2025. That's the day the Dutch government made what could go down as one of the most catastrophic business decisions in European history. Without prior notice, without presenting evidence, without even allowing a proper legal defense, a Dutch appellate court in Amsterdam seized control of Nexperia, a semiconductor manufacturer owned by Chinese parent company Wingtech Technology. The court didn't just freeze assets. They forcibly removed the Chinese CEO, installed a foreign replacement, and transferred nearly all company shares into a so-called independent trust. The official justification? Vague claims about managerial inadequacy and national security concerns. But here's what Amsterdam failed to realize. Nexperia isn't some obscure tech startup. Since Wingtech acquired it back in 2019 for $3.6 billion, Nexperia had become one of the most critical players in the global automotive semiconductor supply chain. We're talking about a company that ships 110 billion individual chips every single year. These aren't the flashy processors that go into iPhones or gaming rigs. These are the unglamorous but absolutely essential components that control your car's braking system, power your headlights, manage battery systems in electric vehicles. Companies like Volkswagen, Toyota, BMW, Tesla, they all depend on Nexperia parts to keep their assembly lines running. And here's the detail that should have set off alarm bells in The Hague. While the Netherlands thought they were seizing a strategic industrial asset, more than 70% of Nexperia's actual manufacturing capacity was, and still is, located in China, specifically in Dongguan and Shanghai. The Dutch government seized the corporate shell. China controlled the factories. Beijing's response was swift, calculated, and brutal. Just 7 days after the seizure, Chinese regulators quietly imposed export restrictions on Nexperia's mainland facilities. Suddenly, those factories, which had been humming along at 90% capacity utilization, were banned from shipping automotive semiconductors to European customers. Overnight, capacity utilization plummeted to under 10%. Delivery rates to Europe collapsed from 95% down to a pathetic 3%. The consequences rippled across the continent like a shockwave. Volkswagen's massive Wolfsburg plant, one of the largest automotive manufacturing complexes in the world, shut down every single production line. Industry analysts estimate VW was losing over $100 million per day during the shutdown. BMW's flagship Munich factory watched helplessly as delivery timelines for luxury vehicles ballooned from 3 months to 6 months. Customers who ordered high-end sedans in the fall still don't have their cars. Within just 2 weeks, European automakers hemorrhaged more than $3.5 billion in lost production value. 12,000 workers faced layoffs or significantly reduced working hours. And the damage wasn't confined to Europe. Honda announced temporary shutdowns across multiple North American plants. One factory in Ontario, Canada, slashed its production capacity by half practically overnight. The numbers tell the brutal truth. 86% of Europe's key industrial manufacturers source chips from Nexperia's Chinese facilities. Roughly 1/3 of automotive supply chain companies rely on Nexperia as their sole supplier for certain critical components. You can't just switch suppliers in this industry. Automotive-grade certification processes can take months or even years. There's no quick fix, no backup plan, no easy out. By early November, the German Association of the Automotive Industry had seen enough. They issued an ultimatum to the Netherlands, threatening to invoke Article 17 of the EU Chips Act, a legal mechanism that would allow Germany to bypass Dutch control entirely and negotiate directly with China. But that automotive crisis? That was just the opening act. The December 1st announcement about rare earth export controls. That's where China revealed the full extent of its leverage. And this time, the target was ASML itself. ASML produces extreme ultraviolet lithography machines, or EUV machines for short. These are arguably the most sophisticated pieces of manufacturing equipment ever created by humans. Each one costs upward of $200 million. They're the size of a bus, contain over 100,000 components, and require precision engineering at the atomic level. And every single one depends entirely on Chinese rare earth materials. Let's break down exactly why. China currently controls approximately 90% of the world's rare earth refining capacity. Not mining, refining. That's the critical distinction. Plenty of countries have rare earth deposits in the ground, but turning those raw ores into the ultra-pure materials needed for high-tech manufacturing? That's a completely different ballgame, and China dominates it. ASML's EUV machines require lenses polished with cerium oxide refined to 99.9% purity. These lenses focus extreme ultraviolet light with such precision that any imperfection, even at the molecular level, ruins the entire system. Only Chinese refineries consistently hit that purity standard. American rare earth operations? They struggle to reach even 93% purity. Not even close. Then there are the magnets. Each EUV machine contains over 10 kilograms of permanent magnets made from neodymium, dysprosium, and terbium. These aren't ordinary magnets. They're incredibly powerful rare earth magnets that can account for more than 30% of the component costs in certain subsystems. China produces over 90% of the world's rare earth permanent magnets. ASML once tried replacing these specialized Chinese magnets with conventional alternatives. The result? Production costs jumped 40%. Performance dropped 30%. It was a total failure. There are no viable alternatives. Southeast Asia's rare earth refining capacity represents less than 5% of global output. American rare earth mining operations face extraction and processing costs roughly 3 times higher than China's. According to ASML's Chief Financial Officer Roger Dassin, the company maintains a rare earth inventory sufficient for approximately 8 weeks of production. That's the buffer. That's the safety net. After those 8 weeks run out, if Chinese export licenses get delayed, or worse, denied, ASML could see monthly production drop by 15 to 20 machines. With each machine representing hundreds of millions in revenue, we're talking about potential annual losses exceeding $3 billion for ASML alone. But the damage doesn't stop at ASML. That's what makes this so dangerous. ASML supplies lithography equipment to Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC, the world's largest contract chip maker. They supply Samsung, Intel, virtually every major semiconductor manufacturer on the planet. Those companies in turn produce processors for Apple, Nvidia, AMD, Qualcomm, Google, Amazon, the entire global technology ecosystem. A disruption at ASML doesn't just hurt one Dutch company, it threatens the entire semiconductor supply chain that powers modern civilization, smartphones, data centers, artificial intelligence systems, autonomous vehicles, military defense systems. The rare earth materials ASML imports from China each year account for roughly 26% of China's total rare earth exports. This isn't a minor dependency. This is a stranglehold. The timing of all this reveals Beijing's strategic thinking. In December 2024, the United States placed Wingtech Technology on the Entity List, essentially a blacklist designed to restrict China's access to advanced semiconductor technology. Then, on September 29, 2025, just one day before the Netherlands seized Nexperia, the U.S. Department of Commerce expanded those sanctions. They issued what's called a Foreign Direct Product Rule, which immediately blocked Nexperia from purchasing critical equipment and technologies, even through third-party suppliers. The Netherlands clearly believed they had Washington's backing. They thought they could execute this seizure cleanly, secure a strategic asset, and maybe even score political points for standing up to China. They were catastrophically wrong. China's counter-message is crystal clear. If Western nations want to cut off Beijing's access to advanced chip-making technology, then Beijing will cut off the West's access to the raw materials needed to build that technology in the first place. It's economic judo, using your opponent's own dependencies against them. And the October 9th announcement included another devastating clause buried in the technical language. It requires case-by-case government approval for any equipment used in producing logic chips at 14 nanometers and below, memory chips at 256 layers and above, and related advanced materials. This directly targets the cutting-edge semiconductor manufacturing processes that define technological leadership in the 21st century. None of this happened by accident. China spent the last 3 decades methodically consolidating control over rare earth mining, processing, magnet production, and downstream component manufacturing. Chinese state-backed entities now control roughly 89% of global rare earth refining and nearly the entire high-performance magnet supply chain. Meanwhile, Western governments are scrambling to catch up, but they're decades behind. In July 2025, the U.S. Department of Defense invested $400 million into MP Materials, becoming the largest shareholder in the only operational rare earth mine in the United States. Sounds promising, right? Industry experts warn that even with this investment, the U.S. won't achieve anything close to rare earth self-sufficiency for years. Building alternative supply chains from scratch takes 10 to 15 years and requires billions in sustained capital investment. The European Union launched its Critical Raw Materials Act with an ambitious goal: produce 7,000 tons of rare earth magnets domestically by 2030. That's still 5 years away, and even if successful, it would represent just a fraction of what Europe actually needs. So here's where we are. China just demonstrated that in the global technology race, raw materials matter just as much as innovation, maybe more. The West spent decades outsourcing rare earth refining because it was cheaper, messier, and less glamorous than designing the next iPhone. Now that strategic negligence has created a vulnerability that Beijing is fully prepared to exploit. The Netherlands thought they could seize a Chinese company without consequences. European automakers are now bleeding billions. ASML, the crown jewel of Dutch industry, faces an existential supply chain threat, and the entire Western semiconductor ecosystem is realizing just how dependent it really is. This isn't just about chips, it's about who controls the building blocks of the future, and right now, China is holding all the cards. The question isn't whether the West will try to rebuild independent rare earth supply chains. They will. The question is whether they can do it fast enough before the next crisis hits. Because one thing is certain, Beijing just showed the world it's willing to pull the trigger. And next time, they might not offer a warning.